Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Derek Pratt, and I'm Director of Education here at the Erie Canal Museum. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you to the Winifred and DeVillo Sloan Family Fund for supporting our talks this year. I'd like to acknowledge that the Erie Canal Museum is itself located on the homeland of the Onondaga Nation, central firekeepers of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Erie Canal is located on the homelands of all members of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mohawk, Oneida, Tuscarora, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca Nations. We recognize that the Erie Canal played a major role in the devastation of their traditional ways of living, negative effects of which still linger to this day. Here at the Erie Canal Museum, we are committed to taking actions as best we can to do our part in addressing these wrongs through education and inclusion, through efforts like our partnership with the Scano Great Law Peace Center, reinterpretation of our exhibits, exciting announcements to come about that soon, stay tuned, and public programs offering important first steps in that process. So, the impact of the Erie Canal has been immense, socially, economically, politically, artistically, the list goes on. Here at the Erie Canal Museum, our mission is to engage the public in this story of the Erie Canal's transformative impacts on peoples and places in the past, present, and future. And like I've said, the Erie Canal has transformed New York in so many different ways. In our collection, we have tens of thousands of objects within it, all of which tell interesting stories about those transformative impacts of the Erie Canal. So we're happy to bring to you today kind of a few snippets of that enormous collection of ours and tell you a few of those stories. Our hope is this will kind of become sort of a holiday tradition for us here at the museum. So keep an eye out next December for another one of these. This is our final lecture of 2024. And then next year becomes the big year, 2025, the Erie Canal's bicentennial. As part of that, we will continue to provide you with top-of-the-line speakers, but our lunchtime lectures and deeper dives will be combined into just one series. I highly recommend considering signing up for an annual pass, since you don't want to miss any of our speakers next year, including our opening lecture of the year on January 15th, featuring New York City Book Award winner Hugh Ryan, who will be discussing how the Erie Canal helped develop Brooklyn's queer community. We will also have labor historian Peter Way, Duncan Hay from the National Park Service talking about the Barge Canal, and many, many more. But now on to today's events. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. If you're on Zoom, raise your hands here. We will answer them at the end. Yeah, we're going to have 4 members of our staff speaking today. I'll be speaking for another member of the staff as well who couldn't make it in. Yeah, and we're going to start off with our Director of Development, Taylor Westerlund.
Thanks, Derek.
No problem.
I got a promotion too.
I did?
Director of Development.
Well, congratulations.
Currently just manager. But anyways, where's the clicker?
Oh, in my hand.
Okay, awesome.
There you go.
Well, thanks again. Thanks everyone for being here. And thank you, Derek. Derek said my name's Taylor, Development and Communications Manager. And I'm going to talk about an artifact that we've had since 2013. If the clicker behaves.
Oh, right.
That could be on.
This happens. If you're a regular on Zoom, we've hit the tradition.
There we go. Well, I'm glad I was the one to get it out of the way. There we go. Christine Davis's copper kettle. This is a cool little artifact. Well, not so little if you're here in person. The pot might look small in this photo here, but as you can see on that black table over there, it's quite large. I like this because it's been around. It's quite old, as with many things in our collection, but it found its way from us from the heart of the Ozark Mountains. So this was donated by 100-year-old Mary Jane Fritch in 2013 from Eureka Springs. She got in touch with us via her neighbor, Lori Carter, because she didn't use any technology back then. Our curator, Dan Ward, talked to her. The kettle itself is crafted out of a single piece of brass. I'll go back so you can look at it, with a reinforced lip over a wrought iron ring. So it's very heavy. It's about a foot deep and has a diameter of 17 inches. And based on the Fritsch's family history, which we'll get into in just a second, we expect it was made in 1820. So this kettle itself was commissioned by Christine Davis, who worked on the canal as a cook for canal laborers. Mary Jane's great-grandmother, to help feed laborers on the canal. She was Mary Jane's great-grandmother and born in 1802. Her father emigrated from Germany and changed his name to Davis. We don't have the German last name that it was originally, to avoid bias he encountered due to the Hessian soldiers that were used by British forces during the Revolutionary War. He married Elizabeth Breidenthal and had two daughters, Christine and Rachel. Christine, in 1820, married a man named John Hassett, who himself was also a canal laborer. And the same year, she found work as a cook, which is when she had this pot itself commissioned. It's unclear, but suspected that John also worked on the canal. He could have been a contractor instead of a laborer, and this could have played a role in Christine finding work on the canal as well. So this is a map of the United States circa 1825. New York is up there in the corner. After the canal's completion, the Davises, or Davis, Christine Davis and the Hassetts, moved to Ohio soon after to work on the Ohio and Erie Canal, which further gives credence to the idea that John was a canal laborer. They both found work on another canal, and then pretty soon moved over to the left side of the map after that to Arkansas, which is where the family resided up until, well, Mary Jane was there up until her death in 2017. As I mentioned, after the canal construction period, it remained in possession of the Hassett family and was unearthed from storage every fall. It wasn't being used to cook for large amounts of canal laborers, to make apple butter for the family. It was passed down from Christine Davis to her daughter, Martha Mariah Hassett, then to her daughter, Margaret Josephine McCary, who was Mary Jane's aunt. Margaret mentioned that she used to keep stored food safe from rodents and other small animals during the winters. It finally landed in the hands of Mary Jane Fritsch, who survived her own daughter. And then to ensure its lasting legacy, she donated to the Erie Canal Museum in 2013. And as Mary Jane recollected to Dan Ward, the kids of the family were tasked with scouring the pot every fall to clean the tarnish off before making apple butter, a wise decision because the copper oxide from brass is harmful if ingested. Whoops, skipped ahead too far. Mary Jane herself, a little bit more about her, lived on a homestead in Eureka Springs until 2017 when she passed away at the age of 104. Her later years were spent finding homes for many of the heirlooms that she collected and existed on this homestead, and advocating for the environmental conservation of the Ozarks. She didn't have access to internet or running water until the age of 102. So as I mentioned earlier, her neighbor Lori initially contacted us to get the donation process started. I spoke to Lori via email earlier this year, and she mentioned that Mary Jane was just very happy and excited that they found a home for this kettle, especially one that understood its historic value and story. So it's on display for everyone here, but it is also going to be on display in the museum on the second floor until early next year, if you'd like to come see it on the tavern bar. And that's all I have. And Steph is next. Go.
Hi, I'm Steph. I'm the interpretation director here, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about this document that was donated to the museum earlier this year. It's a petition dated 1827 advocating for the enlargement of the canal in one of two potentially different ways, which I'll talk about in a minute. This was donated to us by Gloria, who found it just in a stack of papers at an estate sale. So you never know what you're gonna come across. Do let us know if you find anything worthwhile that you want to offload. Okay, so as I'm sure we all know in person and in Zoom, because it's been heavily discussed around here over the past few years, we are in the middle of the Erie Canal's bicentennial period. Next year, in 2025, we will reach the anniversary of the canal's completion. All of this is to say that the petition dates only 2 years after the full length of the canal was completed. The undersigned of the petition are all from, or seemingly all from Herkimer and Montgomery County over here. So we're looking at the Mohawk Valley region of the state. This illustration also from our collection is from a little bit east of there, but it gives you an idea of the relationship between the canal more in the foreground and then the Mohawk River there in the back. But almost immediately after the canal is built, they realize that they built it too small. The original canal is only 40 feet wide, 4 feet deep. When I do tours for the little ones, I like to point out that that's about as tall as they are. Additionally, nearly all of the canal's 83 locks were single chambered, and this means that someone can move west or someone could move east, but not at the same time. Plus, as Derek likes to joke, I will give credit, the Erie Canal gives us one of our favorite modern inventions, the traffic jam. You didn't want to get caught up in one of these during peak season. You could be stuck maybe for a day, and that puts your business behind schedule. It wasn't necessarily uncommon for fights to break out between competing crews or sometimes between a crew and a lock tender. And that brings me to the petition. It's addressed to the Honorable, the legislature of the state of New York. And they're advocating for either double locks to be added to the Erie Canal or for an entirely new canal to be built on the north side of the Mohawk River. They're arguing that this is necessary, quote, that the delays in passing the locks and the hindrance of boats, of passengers and transportation have been a constant and increasing source of inconvenience and vexation to all concerned, in addition to the trouble and expense of delay and of frequent damage to boats and merchandise occasioned by the anxious press for preference at the locks. The same cause produces contention, strife, and lawsuits, not only injurious to the persons concerned, but the citizens in the vicinity of the canal are greatly annoyed by frequent calls to attend as jurors and witnesses to determine these endless controversies. And as someone who was summoned for jury duty last year, I get it. We don't have time for me to, I'm not going to read it all through, but I do think the text of this is very interesting, which is what we're going to focus on, how it changes over the course of a written portion, because by the end, they have completely abandoned one of their original asks. So after the initial complaint, they extol the early successes of the canal. The season before, they note $800,000 was accumulated in tolls. And then they kind of start buttering up the people that they're writing to. They call them their patriotic legislators and talented statesmen, and those, quote, canal commissioners who have heretofore found nothing in nature unyielding to the energies of human industry, unquote. They go on to argue that a new canal would greatly benefit the lumber industry in the northern parts of Montgomery and Herkimer counties, potentially even extending it into Hamilton County. It's going to end up paying for itself, they say. traffic, if they go the route of building an entirely new canal, traffic on the Erie wouldn't be hindered at all by the construction of double locks like they claim it would be. And perhaps most importantly, a new canal would, quote, bring into market the large tracts of land belonging to the state in that quarter more effectively by a canal on the north side of a river by any measure in the power of the legislator. So what they're doing here is this is a tactic that Carol Sheriff writes about in her book, The Artificial River, in which they're identifying what they want and will benefit them with the well-being of the state. I was curious to see what other kinds of things we have in our collection similar to this, and we have a number of petitions dated to that same year, 1827. A lot of them deal with the Black River Canal, which is a lateral canal that was constructed. And all of these petitions use that same sort of patriotic appeal to justify their ask. But, so back to this petition here. By the end of it, they've completely disavowed the idea of building double locks. In fact, they say to double lock the original Erie Canal would be nearly impossible. I present to you enlarged double lock number 33 on the old Erie Canal located at St. Johnsville, which is in Montgomery County. It was in fact possible. We know that this is how the canal was expanded. This was originally built in 1824 and then it was made into a double lock in 1840. So in 1835, the first expansion of the canal was authorized, and we know as a part of that, most locks were doubled. A number of lateral canals would also be built throughout New York State, but not one on the north side of the Mohawk like these people were asking for. So I think like one of the questions that comes to my mind is why even bring up the idea of double locks in the first place then? And I think it's likely a political tactic of rhetoric on the part of whoever wrote the body of the text to bring up this potential and then go point by point about why, how, oh, it's actually going to work, so you should do this thing that I really want instead. So who are the people that signed this? Why did they do this? Why did they want this? And that's a really great question. I'm not entirely sure. There are many undersigned, but so far I've only potentially found two, though I haven't been able to find signatures of these recorded people to confirm, but there was an Albert W. Bowen who signed this petition, who was seemingly working as a doctor in German Flats, Herkimer County at the time, and then also a Richard Herendeen in Newport, Herkimer County, and Herendeen seemingly worked as a farmer and moved to the Mohawk Valley from Connecticut around the time of canal construction. My initial educated guess would be that the signers may have lived on the north side of the Mohawk or otherwise stood to economically benefit from the construction of such a canal. But at least in terms of these two men that I found, the Newport is north of the Mohawk, but the vast majority of German flats, except a little kind of strip, is below the river, which complicates my idea. Though, that is all to say, if anyone is ever interested in volunteering at the museum for kinds of research projects, doing object-specific research is kind of a possibility that is on the table. And that's all I have to say about that.
You have that document available,
Right over there.
that's over there, okay, that's the original?
Yep. All right, now it's my turn. All right, yeah, I'm gonna talk to you about these two receipts. Yes, they are not out there, the only artifacts that aren't, I made a last second audible on what artifact I was going to do. But anyway, these are both receipts from 1863 for the boat H. Crap to be towed by the steamboat Bell on the Schuyler steam towboat line. These receipts have a pretty interesting history behind them and tell a really unique story of the canal. So let's dive into them a bit more. So first off, this canal boat getting towed by a steamboat. This is a very common sight on the canal. So a little about Hudson River steamboats. The first steamboat in America is invented famously by Robert Fulton in 1807. That is the Clermont, as it is generally referred to, sponsored by the incredibly wealthy Robert Livingston, whose house was named Clermont. So he gets a boat named after him too. Livingston and Fulton actually had a state-enforced monopoly on steamboats on the Hudson River for a number of years until the critical 1824 Gibbons versus Ogden case. You may have learned about it in school. It's one of the rare Supreme Court cases you do learn about because it's really important overall in kind of interstate commerce. But importantly, it also said that this state-enforced monopoly of Fulton and Livingston was illegal. Critically, this is 1824. The next year, as we've talked about several times already, the Erie Canal opens in 1825. So a bunch of steamboat companies open up and they're able to do what is pictured here, and that is tow rafts, as they're called, of canal boats up and down the Hudson River. Because canal boats, as you know, you've all heard the song, right? Largely pulled by your mule named sail. Well, there's no towpath on the Hudson River, right? Also, steamboats much faster and more efficient than a mule as well, and they can go upstream much more efficiently. This is an interesting watercolor from the New York State Museum in their collections by a woman, Augusta W. Brown, who took a canal boat ride and did kind of a sketching trip during the late 1800s. Very interesting story, but can't really get into it too much today. Now let's talk a little about the boat, the H. Crap. It's an unfortunate name for a boat, but many New Yorkers had that name. They were seemingly German immigrants. For the most part, there are several. So we have a bunch of documents that came for this boat. They were all acquired in the 1980s, including these two artifacts. And I was able to find from some of the other things, including a chattel mortgage from a year later. At the time, this boat was owned by Frederick Crap, who was a boat builder in Buffalo. He did sell it the next year to, I presume, another German, Jacob Fassbender. And this makes sense. There was a pretty large German immigrant community in Buffalo, as well as many other canal cities as well. Our documents also show that a J.F. Lovejoy was described as the master of the boat, which I take to mean kind of the captain of this boat. But we don't have much information on J.F. Lovejoy himself. Really, though, the H. Crap is not really the star of the show. It is actually the towboat line that we talked about. So the receipt says that the agent of the Schuyler steam towboat line is one T. Schuyler, who is almost certainly this man, Thomas Schuyler. Born October 1811, he began working as a cabin boy on one of his father's Hudson River sloops. And he would work his way up to become a captain of one of those sloops, and eventually would become the treasurer of this canal towing company. In addition to that, he would become a very prominent citizen in Albany. He was president of the Bank of the Capital and the First National Bank, as well as vice president of the Commerce Insurance Company. He was even elected to one term as Albany's alderman and served on the commission for the improvement of the Hudson due to his great knowledge of the Hudson River, having sailed on it for pretty much his whole life. However, his life was relatively short. He passed away at age 54 in 1866. A relatively short life, but a very impressive one, right? President of two different banks and the vice president of a insurance company and owning a pretty substantial Erie Canal Hudson River towboat line. And the fact that he rises to such prominence is very interesting because of his identity, as we'll look at a bit more, and that of his family. So I mentioned he started out as a cabin boy on one of the sloops of his father, Samuel Schuyler. Here is his grave, as well as the Schuyler family plot. Sadly, there are no known images that I could find of Samuel Schuyler Sr. And Samuel Schuyler, his origins are unknown, though it is believed he may have been born enslaved in New York, or his parents were most likely enslaved. He is listed in Albany censuses as a black man. He most likely he or his family would at some point have been enslaved by the prominent Schuyler family. Philip Schuyler, as many of you know, played an important role in kind of the early precursors to the Erie Canal and was also the largest enslaver in the city of Albany during the late 1700s. It is unlikely that Samuel Schuyler was enslaved by Philip Schuyler himself. There's some evidence he may have been enslaved by I believe, nephew of Philip Schuyler, a man by the name of Derek Schuyler. Yes. But anyway, and if that was the case, he would have been freed in 1804. What we do know, the first full-blown definite thing we know about Samuel Schuyler is that he married a free black woman, of mixed race, Mary Martin in 1805, with whom he had several children. It's around that time he starts working on the Hudson River as well in the boat trade. He is listed in an 1813 directory of Albany as a skipper. So he probably owned a boat by that point, which is also when his children are born. At first, these are sloops, which are large sailboats that carry about 125 tons on board them. This is actually when the Livingston-Fulton monopoly still exists, but it appears that shortly after the end of that monopoly, Schuyler was an early purchaser of a steamboat and got in kind of on the ground floor of the steamboat towing trade. He also began acquiring property, especially in the city's south end, which was a really vibrant, kind of ethnically mixed area of the city with a lot of the city's African-American population, but also a number of immigrants as well. He also owned his own flour and feed mill, and he eventually brought his sons, Thomas, who we've already talked about, and Samuel Jr. into the business shortly thereafter. And he passed away a very wealthy man and a well-respected member of Albany's society in either 1841 or 1842. Some of the accounts are a bit mixed. So a little about his son, Samuel Jr. Like I said, he worked with his brother Thomas to expand their father's business, and they operated 12 different steamboats on the Hudson River at one time. They were the America, the Syracuse, the Connecticut, the Niagara, the Belle, which we discussed, the Cornelius Vanderbilt, the Jacob Leonard, the Carey, the G.E. Winance, that one's a heck of a name, the Robert T. Banks, the Ontario, and the Pontiac, all of which were side wheel steamboats, except for the Pontiac, which was the newest of the boats that he had in his fleet. This one had a screw propeller. trying to figure out a good Pontiac automobile joke there, but there are none. Anyway, all of these boats could pull about 50 or so boats at any one, canal boats at any one time. So the H-Crap would have been several times in those towing fleets up the river. Samuel Schuyler himself became quite successful. He became well known for his philanthropy. He also purchased a house in Albany that still stands today. They really modified it and it has this really weird looking cupola, but it gives you kind of this panoramic view of the whole city of Albany, from what I understand. It's pretty interesting. However, Schuyler ran the company until he retired as captain at the age of 80. Seems like a good time to get off the steamboat trade. And the company dissolved with his retirement in 1891. He passed away 3 years later. So that's the Schuyler family of Albany. A really interesting group of folks who show us kind of the existence of slavery during the time period when the canal was being planned, but also some of the social mobility that the canal could allow in it. I have seen some things speculating that the Schuylers participated as well in the burgeoning Underground Railroad movement that was pretty prominent in Albany, though there's no real corroborating evidence of that, or the fact that they were Black. However, in Samuel Schuyler's, what's that thing called? Obituary, there we go. They actually claim that he is just descended from the Dutch forefathers of Albany. So, as you may have noticed, with Thomas Schuyler, both Schuyler brothers were very light-skinned, and it is quite possible, especially as they got older, unless people knew about their family origins, they started to kind of quote-unquote pass as white. But unknown exactly how they identified. But that is the Schuyler family. And now it's Elizabeth's turn to talk about this picture. Sorry, I can feel that.
All right. So, I stumbled across this image a few times when just going through the images in our collection. And then found a reproduction of it, which you can see over there from a previous exhibit. I really like this image. I think it's got a lot of great qualities. It reminds me of a Renaissance image. Like there's just a lot going on. There's a whole story happening here. But I also like it makes me like very curious about a lot of things. Why, if they're seemingly rescuing someone who's drowning in the canal, why did they stop and take a picture? Why is someone just like looking at the camera? Why are they holding his arms up like that? It turns out that all of the descriptions that come with the image, like in the paperwork in our collection, say that this is a view of 5 members of the life-saving corps demonstrating a rescue on a sixth member. So, okay, this is just a description that makes me feel a little bit better about them taking a picture of it. But I also found out that this was not the only image. We actually have a set of 4 of these kind of images from a photo shoot they did. So we also have this group image, which doesn't come with a lot of accompanying information, but it does say that Patrick O'Hara is 3rd from the left. We also have this one, and the paperwork tells us we're looking at 7 members of the Syracuse Volunteer Life-Saving Corps in the Erie Canal, looking towards Blank Bridge. But we do know from the back of this image that it's from the 1890s, which is helpful. And if you zoom in, you can see them all in there. Again, they've got these spectators on the bridge, like the angels watching over them from the Renaissance painting. But there's not a lot that I can glean from this image, though they look like they're having a great time in the canal, which was really notoriously like gross and polluted. So this right here is the final of the 4 images. And again, we know that the guy in the middle that they're dragging out is not actually drowning. And yeah, that's really all that we know about these images from just the stuff we have in the collection. But I still had a lot of questions about what they were doing. So thinking about rescues and drowning in the canal, drowning was a real danger in the canal, and it seemingly remains to be a danger of canal recreation today. There's some information about drowning in the canal being more dangerous because of like the dams and the locks and the obstructions that people can get kind of caught in, but also strong currents when lock gates open or things like that. So on the right side, there is a digitized record from one coroner showing the deaths that he kind of consulted on just between May 7th, 1886 and August 4th, 1886. So in those 3 months, one coroner saw 7 drowning deaths in the Erie Canal. And then on the other side, there's some articles reporting about drowning deaths in the canal. So it was relatively common. And rescue services were just beginning to be kind of formed throughout the United States. So in 1865, the first civilian ambulance was organized in Cincinnati. And it really seems to be a product of the mobile medicine needs and the developments that came with the Civil War. The Civil War and the kind of nature of it led to a need for organized emergency medicine that also helped lead to things like the Red Cross, which was established in 1881. And by this time, by the late 19th century, there's new methods being taught to doctors and nurses, including things like germ theory. And so you kind of get these local civilian rescue services seemingly developing ad hoc through the United States. And you also get a lot more regional hospitals developing between Civil War and World War I. So here we are looking at Syracuse's Hospital of the Good Shepherd. It was founded originally in 1872 and moved to this Marshall Street location you can see here in 1875. And this is their first ambulance. So let's see, this photo was taken in 1898. And then shortly after you get automobile ambulances, initially again kind of developed for battlefield use. And those would be developed much further by World War I. So medical practice is evolving in the United States at that point. And there's kind of an increased chance of saving someone's life with these new theories and tactics and developments of emergency and rescue style medicine. And right around then, the Syracuse Volunteer Life-Saving Corps seems to begin to be active. So now we get to kind of ask what things that volunteer corps was doing around the region. So starting with the article on the top right, which mentions a demonstration given in uniform in Clinton Square, perhaps similar to the one from the original images in our collection. To me, though, that setting did not look like Clinton Square, but it also would have been a few years earlier than this 1901 article. But it seems like these volunteers were doing things like leading demonstrations of water rescues that were being advertised to the public to come and see. If we move down to the bottom right article, apparently the Syracuse Life-Saving Branch was kind of successful enough that they started to form other branches. So a Fulton branch had been formed, and then there was an attempt, as described by this article, to form a similar group in Oswego in 1898. So this rescue style of care was spreading not only through the country, and with these new hospitals, but also spreading through the region as well. The bottom left article details, life-saving medals that were awarded by the Syracuse Volunteer Life-Saving Corps to 3 women who helped rescue people in drowning accidents. And the top left article describes a lecture given by a doctor to the volunteer lifesavers, covering like recommended methods for caring for burns, fractures, pain relief, things like that. And so it seems like that lecture was given to kind of help educate the volunteers first and foremostly, but it was also advertised to the public to come and attend, and the remedies that the doctor describes are included in this article that was, published in the Syracuse Evening Herald and now available to any of those readers. So these volunteers were likely doing some of the life-saving themselves, but they also seemed to put a lot of time into educating the public about how to save lives in these kinds of emergencies, with things like the lecture and the demonstrations that they had photographed, and encouraging action in emergencies by giving out the life-saving medals. But soon after that article was published, unfortunately, the Syracuse Life-Saving Corps disbanded owing to lack of funds. But from these images, we can not only see the physical movement of swimming, drowning, rescuing, things like that in the canal's water, but these images also kind of give a little bit of insight into some efforts to spread emergency medicine and rescue care along the canal and this larger hospital spread through the United States in general. All right, that is all I have on the volunteers.
Questions afterwards. All right, thanks, Elizabeth. All right, so I'm back up, and I'll be presenting Amy's object here, which we see here. There's actually a full suit. Sadly, we couldn't really fit it fully in the space here today. But you can see the helmet as well as a shoe if you are here as well. We will be looking at this diving suit, made famous, of course, by one of the greatest TV shows in history, Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? But this spooky costume has a much longer story than that. So let's talk about the diving suit in our collections. The helmet, overall, this diving suit originally belonged to the New York State Department of Public Works, formerly known as the State Engineer and Surveyor, from 1845 to 1926. It was likely left behind in this building when the DPW abandoned their offices here. It may have been used, most likely, to do underwater repairs on the Waylock or other barge canal structures in the Middle Division. Speaking of the Waylock, I meant to say this right after Elizabeth's talk. 2 people actually drowned right here, even. So, really common overall as a thing. But this thing will make it so you won't drown in the canal. That was my transition I wanted to go for. Just got flustered. Anyway, the suit that we see pictured here on our model, he has since been unmasked by Scooby-Doo and Mystery Inc. As you can see, the suit was made by the Diving Equipment and Supply Company Incorporated of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and it's made of sheet India rubber, covered inside and out with tanned twill, and the black parts are rubber. As you can see in the background already, these pictures are taken in the winter time. I am assuming in this large rubber suit, he is not noticing that. But here we see our diver again on a scow to do some work. And here he is with that helmet on. Let's talk a little about the helmet and matching breastplate. It's a U.S. Navy Mark V helmet, which was made by A.J. Morse and Son in Boston, Massachusetts, in April of 1918. It's made out of tinned copper with plate glass windows in brass frames. I'm having a good time talking today. It weighs approximately 65 pounds, and yeah, you can feel that when you carry it around. So yeah, it is a heavy object, which makes sense. You do need to go down in it. Floating is not its purpose, and God bless you if you could float in it. Also, I would not have wanted to be climbing a ladder or having this on my head in general. 65 pounds, it's a lot to just carry with your arms, let alone your shoulders. But anyway, speaking of heavy things, he also would have had two incredibly heavy boots. The boots that we have in our collection, we have both of them. One is on display over here. Were made sometime after 1901 by the Ball Band Rubber Company in Mishawaka, Indiana. The bottom part is made of either copper or lead, we're not 100% sure, while the upper part is made of rubber with leather straps and laces. It's approximately 14 inches long, 6 inches wide, and 9 inches tall. So it's a big old shoe, and it'll keep you firmly planted at the bottom of the canal. So why are people diving into the canals? And what's up with this series of glass plate negatives in our collection that show their use? These suits would have been used primarily for repair work on the canal. That's what this gentleman is up to here. We see him here. Here's another postcard from our collection actually showing the aqueduct this crew is working on. This is the Oneida Creek Culvert in Durhamville, which some of these indicate it had been damaged in some way in a winter storm due to all the ice and snow that's around, or else floodwaters may have damaged it as well. A little about the aqueduct itself. It's built over Oneida Creek as part of the enlarged Erie Canal, and the aqueduct is located just west of Durhamville on the border of Oneida and Madison counties. It's built around it was completed around 1856. Yeah, we see folks hard at work here. Here's some more images of the repair efforts on the site. You can see multiple people, it appears, were wearing this suit at different times. Yeah, and they might actually. This is from pretty serious damage. This could possibly also be from, I don't know, either the $9 million improvement or later kind of adjustments made when they moved away from the towpath era canal. But yeah, this suit would have been used to go down, inspect things. You probably weren't going to be down there for too long using it, and also doing super extensive repairs, I would imagine. It is very bulky. Like I said, just the helmet is 65 pounds. So it's really more of an inspection thing and really quick patchwork repairs. These guys with their large pulleys and cranes, et cetera, are probably doing a lot of the heavy lifting, which couldn't be done with the suit. So that's all of our artifacts. We've taken you through about 100 years of canal history. Are there any questions? Please, I welcome you to check things out if you're here in person. Any questions here in the room? Yes.
Yeah, regarding the steamships, you mentioned that one of them was made in Buffalo and it was a total about 10. You know if they were all made here or?
So that was the canal boat was built in Buffalo. The steamboats would have been built on the Hudson River. Yeah. Also, I noticed I got a correction, which I may have misspoke. And pointed out that the first steamboat in America was built by John Fitch 20 years before Robert Fulton's. Meant to say the first commercially successful steamboat built by Fulton. I hope that is a good enough caveat. Someone also asked I think that the records of insurance for these Schuyler steamboats in, say, the Hartford Steam Boiler Insurance Company or other insurers in Hartford, Connecticut. Great question. I hadn't really thought about that before. Maybe that would kind of be looking for, I imagine, a needle in a haystack, because there were a bunch of insurance companies, but that could be somewhere to look. I think there's more info to be found on both the H-crap and the Bell as well. Let's see. Steph, you got a question on Zoom. The petition for enlargement in 1827 refers to lawsuits over fights to move through the canal. Has the museum found evidence of these lawsuits in court records? And was there a specific area where the fights were greatest? Any idea?
I don't know. That's a great question. I don't.
Bill, you're giving us a million great research questions. This does replug what Steph had to say, that we are always looking for help going through our archives, learning more about the documents that we have in there, because we might have some lawsuits somewhere. I mean, like I said, that H-crap record, there's like 25-ish documents about the H-crap, most of which are like boring, like insurance and mortgage documents that are kind of, they take time that we often don't have here at the museum, kind of comb through them. And we've got like, what is it, 20,000 objects in the collection? 30,000. We got some tens of thousands of artifacts, so only so much time in a day as well. If you ever want to help us do some research, we're always welcome. You'll get an email from me at the end of this talk, so you'll have my email address. All right, I gotta talk about the Sodus Canal next time. Any questions? Yes, Elizabeth?
You used the phrase, the Department of Public Works abandoned this building. What happened there?
Oh, yes. The Department of Public Works abandoned the building. They were replaced by different state agencies. Yeah, people remained working in this building until the 1950s, I believe. They just transferred it to other departments.
Just leave this building.
Yeah, no, this wasn't just like a ghost building as far as I know.
Okay.
This is a good question for Steph and Amy. How do we get most of our new acquisitions? Is it individuals or corporations?
Yeah.
Yes, it's definitely not corporations generally, though we do have a few collections from, I know, when like that one engine company went out of business. Sometimes we get those, but it's mostly individuals. Yes. And we actually had a descendant of Canvas White donated another really interesting object recently for you canal heads here in the audience and out there online. Did steamboats at that time use wood or coal? And not positive, though for the most part they're using coal. I don't know about the very early stages though. I am a canal guy. Steamboats are kind of ancillary. Any other questions in the audience or on Zoom? Great. Well, thanks for coming out. Please check out the gingerbread gallery. It's a fun time. Happy holidays, folks.